The truth about happiness. A wise pastor once told me, Stephen, the more money you have, the more headaches you have. Today I want to show you that the truth about real happiness. So let's get started. Hey everybody, welcome back to Reason for Truth. I'm your host, Stevie Garofalo. This is Reason for Truth, where the truth comes first, reasons come last, but we're always constantly learning, because when we stop learning, we stop teaching, or at least stop teaching well. Listen, what about Jeff Bezos? You know, Bill Gates, guy's got a lot of money, all these wealthy politicians. Don't forget, they, in many cases, you and I, as compared to the rest of the world, most of us are very wealthy. So, listen, are you truly happy? What does it mean to be truly happy? What makes or breaks happiness in life? Well, in the West, at least in the 21st century, all too often happiness is measured by wealth, maybe by recreation, freedoms, misguided freedom in many cases. As a result, humans, including most Christians, tend to envy others. And we know that's not right as compared to what we may have ourselves. Lack of contentment. This is what the Bible calls, or certainly Solomon and Ecclesiastes calls, a striving after the wind. And today I'm going to show you through God's Word that amassing wealth is more often than not really what it's cracked up to be. And it's actually quite often futility. The futility of human striving to become wealthy and important in life isn't in and of itself ultimately fails to satisfy. So let's get started. King Solomon said in Ecclesiastes chapter 6, verses 1 to 2, this is an evil one that we have seen under the sun, and it lies heavy on mankind, a man to whom God gives wealth, possessions, and honor, so that he lacks nothing at all that he desires. Yet God gives him wealth, possessions, and honor, so that he lacks nothing at all that he desires. Yet God does not give him power to enjoy them, but basically someone perhaps stronger enjoys them. This is vanity, it's a grievous evil. In summary, verses 1 through 9 in total, Solomon makes clear that the futility of riches ultimately fail to ultimately satisfy our soul. Just like the pastor told me, he was very wise what he said. I'm not putting down money, by the way. I like money, and I'd like a little bit more of it. But most of us are going to say how much a little bit more, right? Well, how much we need and how much we want and how much we don't really need, and what does that mean to us are important questions. Not really the focus of today, but today's devotion, I want to break down these verses in lesson for you and I. First, let's look at prosperity without the divine gift of enjoyment amounts to nothing, zero. Verse 19 clarifies what Solomon is saying in verses 1 and 2. To rewind here a little bit, here Solomon, the Qualet as he's called, gives us an example of what all too prevalent today in today's world, even within the Christian body, as to the wealth's inability to bring true happiness and enjoyment. Solomon presents what amounts to be his own story as someone who God granted everything he wants: wealth, passions, honor, power, except that God has withheld the ability to enjoy them. He figured that out. Instead, someone else, a stronger person, actually gets to enjoy his wealth in light of him, right? Whether he takes it or whether he inherits it, someone else will sadly enjoy his wealth for him. That's number one. Second, number two, the shock of Solomon's conclusion. He concludes that this failure to achieve happiness is nothing short of a shocking horror. What does Solomon mean by happiness, by the way? Solomon is basing what happiness is according to traditional Hebrew thought as laid out in Proverbs. Ecclesiastes, a Song of Songs, goes through that, and Solomon makes clear that wealth, or the wealthy, are more often than not happy, and even make those around them miserable. You ever heard the term misery likes company? And in the process of trying to seek happiness in a material world that's been bestowed upon them, listen, God at least allowed it to these people, believers or not, to prosper. Remember, God causes it to rain on the just and unjust. And God uses the graphic example of a miscarried child is better off than, as to the person who just cannot find true happiness. Verse 3, that's a staggering admission as to the truth of riches in relation to happiness. Solomon's not saying that all rich people are miserable. No, he's not saying that at all, or that riches in and of itself is bad, only that the pursuit of riches in general produce more misery than happiness due to the human's condition who put the riches, God bless them in the first place, in front of God. It takes a special person to be able to soberly keep proper perspective on power, money, and wealth. And certainly all those things are are very difficult for any sinful, we're all sinful human beings to handle. That's number 2. Third, Solomon's third point is that pursuing riches is futile, just pursuing in general. I told the story before, a young man, he was in high school, just about 17. He said, Mr. Garofalo, I'm gonna become a millionaire. He says, no, you understand. Most people say they're gonna become a millionaire. I'm gonna become a millionaire. And that guy was, varsity football, wrestling, smart 4.0 student. I said, I have no doubt. The only thing is you might find it real empty when you get there. If you pursue riches just for riches purposes, you're gonna find it very futile. Exactly what we're talking about today. I went over a little bit of that with him. But some of these, you'll see in some of these verses, especially in verses 7 to 9, as unrelated to the previous section. Some do in this Ecclesiastes passage. But we're going to read a little further, and I don't see that to be the case at all. These verses likely represent another reason that pursuing wealth is so futile. Solomon seems to hammer home the fact that wealth in and of itself does not satisfy. I think we can establish that. And I know there's a lot of people saying, well, I'd like to try it first. All right, we're not going to get into that discussion. I've heard that 1,000 times, thought about it myself. Now let's think about it like one hunting for their food, right? You have to keep returning day in and day out. Certainly in the old days when there wasn't refrigeration and freezers, we were never satisfied. We buy houses, we want more. We're never satisfied. Verse 7. Verse 8 seems to presuppose the idea that the wise often accrue wealth, but if wealth cannot satisfy, well, there's no advantage to being wealthy or having all that money to begin with. Listen, at the end of the day, I'm going to conclude with the fact that, plain and simply, the pursuit of money in and of itself is miserable, and it'll bring on more problems. Really, the joy and contentment of God and family and other people and helping other people, that's where true joy is. I'm telling you right now, we have a good number of very wealthy people, certainly here in the United States. And I'm going to tell you firsthand, not all of them, but many of them are pretty, I'd say, miserable. But I'm going to leave it at that. In conclusion, in the end, instead of striving constantly to have more just for more's sake, there's times where we want to have a bigger house because we have more children. That's verse 9, by the way. And those are good things. Listen, if we need a new car, we got to strive for that. I get that. And it could be a nice car. Nothing wrong with that. Just don't, let it get out of hand or take too much of the driver's seat instead of you being in the driver's seat, morally and biblically speaking. Don't get me wrong. It's good to strive to be better off, to do better in school, to do better in your career. Let's just make sure our gauge of comparison is not against other humans, but against what God has given us to do with the short days we call life. And to you and I alike, just to gain wealth has no value in and of itself. The key here is keeping wealth and the pursuit of wealth in its proper perspective. If we don't, we risk living a life of misery. And this is an evil that I've seen under the sun, and it lies heavy on mankind. It's verse 2. It says, a man whom God gives wealth, possessions, and honor, so that he lacks nothing at all that he desires. Yet God does not give him power to enjoy them, but a stranger enjoys them. This is the vanity, and it's a grievous evil. So at the end, listen, I'm just going to wrap up here by saying, let's make sure we keep all things in perspective. Let's make sure that we don't get too heavenly minded or that we're not any earthly good. By the same token, let's not let or make money or the pursuit of money and wealth and power rule our day. Because if we do, we're going to be miserable. Those around us could be miserable. We're going to miss the mark in terms of living out the great life that God has for us, the true joy and the peace that surpasses all understanding. Can't buy that. So God's blessings to you. 2 things. Make sure to subscribe to this channel. God C.O. Sinistro, bam, Italian right hook. Hit that little alert bell down there. Ding, ling, ling. Tells you Garofalo's got another episode coming out. Then you want to join my community. You want to get a little bit more deep in what we're saying, what we're doing. That's the only place you're going to find that. That's a closed community. StephenGarofalo.com. I'll see you over there. I am your host, Stephen Garofalo. This is your Reason for Truth for today.